They called them one of the most dangerous groups in America. Armed, radical, a threat to the nation. But when you actually look at what they were doing, something doesn't add up. Because before the raids, before the headlines, before the fear, there were breakfast programs. Children were going to school hungry, and the Black Panther Party started feeding them. Free. Every morning. No questions asked. Not just food, but health clinics. Testing for illnesses that were being ignored. Providing care in communities that had been overlooked for years. They created education programs, teaching people how systems worked and how those systems affected their lives. And then there were the patrols, watching the police, observing, making sure people in their neighborhoods weren't being abused. So now the question becomes, if they were feeding people, educating people, and protecting their communities, why were they labeled dangerous? That's where the story shifts. Because the official narrative says the Panthers were violent, that they posed a threat to public safety. But when you look closer, you find something else. You find surveillance, constant. You find infiltration, informants placed inside the organization. You find efforts designed not just to monitor, but to disrupt, to divide, to weaken what they were building. Their leaders were followed, watched closely, and some of those moments would define how the public saw them. In Chicago, a young leader named Fred Hampton was organizing, building coalitions, bringing together people across racial and economic lines. And before that work could grow any further, his apartment was raided in the middle of the night. He was killed alongside Mark Clark, inside his own home, at just 21 years old. At the same time, other leaders were being pushed, targeted, or forced out. Eldridge Cleaver would leave the country. Huey Newton would face constant legal battles. So now, the story isn't just about what the Panthers were doing. It's about how they were being handled. Because once a group is labeled dangerous, the public stops asking questions. Once that label sticks, everything else becomes easier to justify. Surveillance becomes protection. Disruption becomes necessary. And force becomes acceptable. And that changes everything. Because yes, there were weapons. Yes, there were confrontations. But at the same time, there was something else happening. A community organizing itself, providing for itself, building systems where none existed before, and challenging a structure that wasn't designed to serve them. So maybe the question was never just, were they dangerous? Maybe the real question is, what happens when people begin to organize in ways that challenge power? And who decides when that becomes a threat? Because once you start looking at it that way, the story starts to shift. And what you thought you understood starts to look very different.